Yo, what up, Facebook? What up, fellas? Welcome to the Sunday Sermon with Mike, your mentor. Hope you guys had a great weekend. Mine was pretty busy. Played in the first Macker that I've played in probably about 5 years, and it just so happened to be on the top men's court. If you don't know what Macker is, it's a 3-on-3 basketball tournament that was huge when I was a kid. I mean, literally thousands of teams. The site where you'd play basketball, you'd have to park like a mile away and walk because there would be just so many people. And it's kind of crazy to see how much it shrunk since then. And yeah, it was interesting. It was good. It felt good being back out there. Played some good basketball. It was fun with a group of guys that I'd never played together with. So yeah, we did all right, 2-2. It's a double elimination tournament, so it's grateful to get to do that to get to do that. So yeah, so tonight's Sunday sermon. If you're watching this, thank you. Hashtag live. If you're watching the replay, hashtag replay. But I want to talk to you tonight about mindset. And if you're new to this page, I've been called to speak into the lives of men on an individual one-on-one basis and on a group basis through these type of things like I'm doing tonight, and speak to men primarily on the responsibility and the higher calling that we have on our lives as fathers, as husbands, as leaders in our community. Oh, what's up, Demi? I'll read all your posts and respond to you here later, but I appreciate you tuning in. Um, so that threw me off my game. All right, so if you're watching this, yeah, so that's what I'm here to do. Is I'm here to encourage you to be the best man that you can become, because I mean there was two where I'm at in America. There was two mass shootings last night, and then I think this morning was the other one. And this world is getting crazier and crazier every day, and it's my personal belief that the world is getting crazy because men have not lived up to their responsibility in these different areas of their life, and we have not honored that calling on our lives. We have not honored the people that we come in contact with every day, regardless of if they agree with us or not. And we've forgotten as people, as men, what that looks like and how to get along with people that don't have the same beliefs as us. And it's formed into this us versus them type of thing, which is completely BS, right? If I cut you, if you cut me, we all bleed the same color. We're humans, and we've been called to far more than what we've showed as men over the last couple of decades. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing this. So tonight on the Sunday sermon, we're going to go ahead and talk about wisdom. So I'm going to share my screen with you here, and we'll get into this. All right, Sunday sermon, week 30, the conversation in your head. All right, so the first thing is, when you think of your mind, right, the mind is a programmable supercomputer. There's nothing like it in the world. The amount of knowledge that we can hold, the amount of memories we can hold, the amount of information, our mind's ability to be able to recall those things. And the crazy thing about the mind is it really doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's fake. And it's influenced by its senses, right? The information that you give it: sight, sound, taste, smell, touch. And to demonstrate this, I want to talk about three experiments that were done. So the first experiment that was done was during a time before there was all this type of ethical stuff revolving experiments. And what they did is they strapped this guy into a chair and they blindfolded him. And for the next, I believe it was 72 hours, they told him over and over repeatedly that they were going to burn him, right? That's all he heard over and over is, we are going to burn you, we are going to burn you, we are going to burn you, continuously. And so what the experimenters did is, next to where they had him strapped into this chair was this bucket, and it was full of ice and water, and in it was a metal bar, right? So at the end of the 72 hours, they changed from we're gonna burn you to, okay, are you ready? Here we go, we're gonna burn you now. And they pulled the bar out and they stuck it to this guy's arm. And because his mind, that's all that his mind had been hearing for 72 hours, and he didn't know any difference, he started to scream and cry out and really thought that his arm was being burnt. And his body reacted in the same way. He actually had third-degree burns on his arm. His skin blistered up because his mind didn't know the difference between what was real or not, just what it had been being told over that period of time. So the second experiment that was done has come about recently with new technology, right? So with virtual reality. And in this experiment, they put these virtual reality glasses on this guy and they stick him in a room, right? And then through the programming, they put a hole in front of him. So they're seeing him on the screen, right? There's two screens. One that's showing like a third-person view over his shoulder, so you can see him standing in this room, or his avatar standing in this room, and then you can see the hole on the ground. And then the second screen is exactly what he's seeing through the VR. So he's looking down into this hole, and basically there is no bottom to this hole. And in the experiment, they tell him to step forward and to step in the hole. Now, mind you, he knows he's in a virtual environment, right? That this isn't real. But all his senses are telling him something that's completely different. And in this video, you see him go to take a step in this hole after a few minutes of coaxing. Is that the right word? Being encouraged, I guess, by the experimenters that he'll be okay and to do it. And as he goes to step into this fake hole, you see from the third-person camera view that his body cannot distinguish if this is real or not. So his body acts as if he is falling into a hole, and he crumples completely to the ground. So that was pretty crazy. So the third experiment was an experiment that you could find, I think it was in either Newsweek or Time, where I read this. And what they did is they put a guy or a person in a chair, and they put the VR headset on him. And then on the other side of this room, they sat a doll in a chair. And when the guy looked through the VR headset and he looked down, he was basically, it was like he was the doll, right? So all he would see was the doll's arms hanging by the side, and then the doll's legs hanging over the edge of the chair, even though obviously he wasn't the doll. And it's the same type of setup. Two screens, one with the third party or the third person view of him sitting in the chair, and then another screen of what he's seeing through the VR. And so what the experimenters do in this study is, if you've ever been to the doctor and they take out that thing that kind of looks like a triangle and it's connected to a bar, and they hit you on your knee to test your reflexes, well, whatever that tool is what they take out, and they go up to this doll, right? It's a mannequin, a doll, and they hit this doll on the knee, and the guy wearing the virtual reality headset, who looking through it is perceiving life as if he's the doll, reacts in the same way as if his knee is actually being hit, right? And you see in the third person view his leg actually extending and him having these reactions as if he's actually being hit in the knee. So I tell you these examples to try to prove my point that or to reiterate or enforce my point that your mind doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's fake. It only responds to the stimulus that it's being given. So when I say that, we need to talk about then how do you take control of your mind, right? If it's this thing that this mechanism that you can feed all this stimulus, how do you gamify that? How do you manipulate that situation? How do you make that work to the best of your ability, right? And this is the power of mind control. And what that looks like is we need to be conscious of what we feed ourselves. And right, so you have a diet, and your diet is not only the food that you eat, but it's far more than that. It's what you watch on TV. It's what you listen to. It's what you read. It's the people that you hang around with. It's all these external stimulus that you let come into your life that your brain is processing and growing and learning from and being affected by. I mean, all you got to do is get off Facebook for a week and put your phone down and realize how much more content you are, how better you feel, just the difference you can feel in your life. It's if you've ever fasted from Facebook or fasted from social media or just fasted from your phone in general, the appeal life takes on just from that little thing. So what I want to transition into is what is called the alchemy of self, right? And alchemy in this context is how can we affect our environment and build or manipulate the things that are around us to help improve ourselves and for us to function in our greatest capacity. And I want to show you what this looks like in my life and how I help do this. So first thing, and it's interesting. So the Bible talks about this, and the Bible says faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So what I want you to notice first is that says faith comes by hearing, not by having heard, right? So you got to notice that subtlety there, right? Because there's a difference. One is present tense, and one is past tense. So your faith isn't built up by you in that moment hearing those things or feeding yourself those stimuli. Your faith is built up by having heard those things and then seeing those things come to fruition. So the way that you reinforce this in your own mind is you need to hear those things over and over and over and over and over again till they become ingrained inside of you. The second thing is, the Bible talks about the word being a two-edged sword, right? Or it's like a two-edged sword. And what the Bible is saying when it speaks about that is if you picture a sword, right, it has two sides. The first edge of that sword is what God says, right? So what does God say about you? Do you know what God says about you? Do you know what God says about your identity, who you were created to be, what your purpose is in life, what you bring to this life? And just like a double-edged sword, that second edge is what you're saying. So are you coming into agreement with what God says about you, what God says about your identity, what God says about who He created you to be, what God says about your purpose? And when you come into agreement with that and you begin to repeat those things and tell yourself those things, it's powerful, like a two-edged sword. So this verse in the Bible from Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." So that's an example of what God is saying about you. So you need to come into agreement with that, and you need to say that to yourself, and you need to train your mind. You need to come into agreement with that and tell yourself that you have a plan, or that God has a plan for your life. You were created for a purpose, and God's plan is for you to prosper, and it's not for Him to harm you, but to give you hope and to give you a future. And there's lots of other verses that speak to your core identity and what you were created for. The next point is, when it comes to faith and it comes to creating the person that you want to become, you need to believe that first, right? Because as you believe that, you will speak that. And then we'll see that how this forms a feedback loop for you. See, and you need to notice that you have a choice. So you have a choice to remain silent. You have a choice, or you have a choice to come into. Well, you actually have three choices, I guess. Your first choice would be to stay silent. Your second choice would be to disagree with what God says about you and your identity, and what God says about your purpose and His plan for your life. And your third choice is to come into agreement with those things. So this is what this looks like, right? And this is something that one of my mentors showed me. And here we have a feedback loop. And it's interesting, right? Because on the left-hand side, we'll see in that first box, or actually we'll see in the red box, we have a belief, right? We have a belief about ourselves. And that belief could be true. That belief could be untrue. And the question is who am I becoming? Because we are always growing, right? We are always constantly changing, and that's a result of the things that we let into our world, the stimulus, right? What we listen to, what we watch, what we read, who we hang out with, all those types of things. And then we have that first gray box is the first thing that is affected by those beliefs, and we make that choice, right? So we have a choice of changing our thoughts and our beliefs. Now, once we change our thoughts and our beliefs, our next choice is to take massive action, right? If we believe something, we need to take action that backs up that new belief. And when we take action and we act on that new belief, confidence comes with that, and we start to grow. And then we see that forces a new reality in our lives, right? And what we're becoming is being confirmed through those actions. And now you experience this new reality by repeating those actions over and over, right? Because it's reinforcing that confidence, it's reinforcing that change, it's reinforcing that growth in you that is experiencing. And then as you experience that new reality, you're getting a feedback from that, and then you can adjust accordingly, or adjust those beliefs, adjust those thoughts accordingly to continue to change who you are and who you're becoming. And this plays out in life in a multitude of different ways. So a simple example, right, that comes to mind is I think about my son, right? When he was 6 years old, he had this belief that I would say it was more of an unconscious belief, not one that was necessarily voiced, but one voiced through words, but one that was voiced through actions and the decision or the things that he chose to do. And that belief is that I need other people to do everything for me. And that's very normal, right? He was a young boy. He had been taken care of, he relied on the people in his lives to get him to that point, right? And he didn't have really any responsibility. He just showed up and did what he was supposed to do in that moment. And the way that this started to change was we went to Subway one day, and he really enjoys Subway, and he would get the same foot-long ham and cheese toasted sandwich every single time. Well, one of the first things that I started doing was, in order to change who he was becoming and to reinforce this, was to encourage him to speak up for himself and order the sandwich on his own, right? So now this is a really simple thing. It's a tiny, small adjustment, but it was extremely empowering for him, because the first time that he spoke up and he addressed the lady behind the counter and voiced what he wanted in asking for it, and then seeing that sandwich being made and then given to him, that reinforced in his mind that he was able to speak up for himself. He was able to make decisions for himself. He was able to ask for what he wanted, and not only ask for what he wanted, but then receive it, right? It gave him power. It gave him confidence. It encouraged him to have some control in that area of his life. And that's just a simple example of what that looked like, of what that looks like. And that's played out on many areas of all of our lives, because a lot of us have good beliefs about ourselves that we hold on to, in that we reinforce and we encourage. And we all have things and beliefs that we struggle with that might not necessarily be true. You know, one of the things that I grew up with, and maybe I seem confident, you know, doing this and doing these lives and talking about this, you know, I somewhat prefer to be introverted, but part of that comes out of this belief that I used to carry about my opinion didn't matter. So if I believed my opinion didn't matter, then I wouldn't speak up. I wouldn't speak up for myself. I wouldn't speak up for others. And, you know, I had to get back to the root of that and deal with that. And the root of that for me was growing up with my grandfather, God bless him. You know, in that generation, you didn't speak unless you were spoken to. So there were times that I would try to speak up, and because I wasn't addressed, you know, I basically, my voice, how do I say this? My voice didn't matter. You know, there was no attention given to what I was saying. So I learned through this, not saying it was right or wrong, that this lie got planted in my head that what I thought and what I said didn't carry weight and didn't matter. And I've had to work and work and work on that. And I still, at times, if I'm in a meeting or I'm meeting someone new, I have to fight. I have to fight that a little bit, as those lies try to reemerge and replant themselves in my mind. And I have to take those thoughts captive and tell myself that that's not true. What I do have to say does matter. What I am saying is making a difference in people's lives. Like, I need to speak up more, and just watch how that cycle takes place. And I'm to myself, I'm reconfirming that, right? I'm solidifying that in my own mind. So there's just two examples for you. So now I want to talk about, you know, what this looks like for me. And I'm going to show you an example. And this is me being really vulnerable with you guys, showing you this, right? So this is something, hold on a second, that one of my mentors had me do. And maybe I would encourage you to do the same thing. So I need to answer these questions, and I had to put together this booklet. And to be honest with you, I've gotten away from this, but I'm getting back into it. But when I first started this, I would literally go through this every single day and reinforce these things to me. So it all goes back to that foundation about changing how we think and how we perceive ourselves, and growing into the person that we need to become, or that we want to become, the person that God has for us, the purpose that God had for us. So this is speaking to our identity. So this is the first page, and I actually built this out, had it printed, laminated. It's on my desk next to me, and the goal is to review this every single day and remind myself of this, right? So it's called the Mike King Identity, and then I just put some words in there that would describe myself, right? How I would want to be described by other people, you know, as a warrior, as a worshiper, as a big brother, as a person who's contrarian, you know, doesn't just follow the herd, you know, as a servant leader, someone who's vulnerable, someone who's wise, and someone who's passionate. And then on this first page, I've got some pictures that remind me of certain things. So, you know, the first picture I have is of one of my mentors, Chuck Missler, you know, and just the man that he was. And then I have, you know, an organization that I participated in called Fellowship of the Sword, where uh, you know, we help men, and or the organization helps men in a lot of various ways, and how much that's changed my life and changed the lives of so many men that I know. And then I got a picture of a lion and a lamb, and that represents a word that was spoken over to me, or spoken over me at one point about my identity, about me having this duality inside of me of reflecting both a lion and a lamb. So that reminds me of that word. And then I got a picture of Mike Tyson, right? Like Iron Mike. And that's like a part of me, you know, it just speaks to kind of maybe the little warrior inside of me, and this person who's tough, and I can get through things, you know. And then I have this picture, a portrait of, you know, someone's idea of what Jesus looked like, because he plays a central role in my life. And then I got this picture of Jerusalem, you know, in Israel, because it's a place that I'd like to visit one day. So basically, this is like a what's it called? A visualization board, or dream board, maybe is what it's called. And then I got like this building that I like downtown. You know, it's a condo building. You know, and then the Arrow, the penthouse. You know, how cool it would be to, you know, live up there someday, and maybe what that represents. And then I got a picture of Michael Jordan, right, dunking over the Lakers, and just you know, to me that represents like being passionate and striving. You know, you got this guy on defense who's trying to stop him from his ultimate goal. You know, and this maybe represents our fears and this belief that we can't accomplish what we want. And Michael Jordan was a good picture of not letting those things stop you, and pushing through that, and the ability to do great things. And I got a picture of my grandpa, you know, and just the role that he played in my life, and all the seeds that he planted in me about how to treat people and how to way to carry myself. And then I got a picture of some island escape, you know, and it just reminds me of how much I like to travel and get out and see the world, and experience different things. So that's the cover page. I'm not going to show all this to you guys or talk about all, but I'll show a little bit more to you. So then I talk about, you know, my legacy, and here's some pictures from my life. And then you know, uh, I'm a proud father, I'm a husband, I'm a brother, I'm a friend, I'm a brilliant thinker, I'm an inspirational speaker, you know. And I may not be all of these things now, but this is what, you know, I'm aspiring to on some of these things. And these pictures represent kind of what has happened in my life up until this point, right? So here's a picture of me and my family, right? It just reminds me of the family that I never had growing up, and how blessed I am to, you know, be married and to have kids, and that we have a close family. And here's a picture of me, my brother and sister, and how close we were, and just reminds me of um, love and warmth and family. And then I got a picture that was taken from an interview that I did with my church outside. And I got a picture of my brother, right, and it reminds me of how precious life is and how innocent he was at that age, and um, you know, and just a memory of him. And then I got a picture of me walking and holding my daughter's hand when we lived in Chicago, and it speaks to me about what leadership really looks like, and um, gentleness, and taking others by the hand, and bringing them along, and caring for them the same way that we would care for our own child. And then I got a couple of pictures from the boys in college, my roommates and the guys on the basketball team, and just reminds me of that time in my life, and everything I went through with my brother's suicide, and choosing to do hard things even though we don't want to do them, and how choosing to go back to practice and to play, as tough as that was, how it got me through that time in my life, and embracing those hard things is part of us living our lives and finding enjoyment in a deeper meaning of life. And then I got a picture of this deer because there's a real crazy story behind this, where this deer died, and God asked me to pray over this deer when I hit it with my car and it was dead. And this picture is from when this deer came back to life. And I know that probably sounds crazy to some of you, and I've only shared that story with the details of the story with a couple people. Maybe that's a story for another time, but that's what reminds me of this, is like that miracles still do happen, that God does still intervene in our lives in different ways. And then I got a picture of me and my wife from one of our weekend dates. I want to think it was from New Year's, and just how much I enjoy getting away and spending time with her. And then, this picture of me coaching basketball with one of my best friends growing up, and just reminds me of giving back to others, and in the enjoyment I get out of coaching, just not on a sports level, but in general. And then I got a picture of me and some of our good friends, Bonnie and Heather, and the importance that friendship plays in our lives, right? And how grateful we should be to have good friends, and what that means. So, and then on the next page, I remind myself of my story, and I've talked about all these things throughout the Sunday sermon uh, as we've gone along, and it just reminds me of where I was, from growing up poor in the ghetto to husband, father, friend, world-leading mentor, coach of men, helping men find freedom from their past, take responsibility, and regain purpose. And it's the unfinished story of Mike King. And then, it continues on the next page, and I've got these visual reminders along the way of all these defining moments in my life, and then how there's more to come. And then I wrote out this manifesto, right, of what I want my life to entail, and what I want that to look like, and to go and dream and put on paper something crazy, like something that only God could make happen, and like what that looks like, right? And then I've got on the next page identity, so I talk about my character traits, like the things that I want in my life. I talk about what type of body I want, my style, like getting super granular, talking about different achievements that I want to accomplish in my life. Once again, reminding myself of my mentors, and then how I brand myself. And then these are some goals from 2008. And then here's where a lot of the programming takes place, and coming to agreement with words about ourselves, because words carry power. And then these affirmations that I just come along with and agree with. So like, I always think and act today. I feel heroic, confident, and exhilarated, knowing my actions today will create momentum tomorrow and the next day. I feel unstoppable. I am free of fear of rejection. Rejection is a necessary thing to achieve success. I act without fear of rejection and feel confident, strong-minded, and energized. So what I did with these is I wrote all these out, and I've got pages of them. Some of them scripture, some of them beliefs about myself, right? I think this might be the last page. Nope, there's another one. Things about my character, things about the gifts that God's placed in me, all these things. And I recorded myself reading these things, and I listened to that frequently, that recording, to just reinforce those things in my mind, right? Once again, over and over, so that I can begin to. What's going on with this thing? So I can begin to reinforce those things in my life, and change my beliefs about a lot of things, uh, and just help myself grow and grow into that person that I want to become and that person that I know that God has for me. So that's an excellent, awesome exercise to do. So if you want to come back to this video and do that exercise for yourself, and put some time into that, because if you don't take the time to really get crystal clear about um, not only who you are right now, but who it is that you want to be and what that looks like, you're going to have a hard time uh, of making that happen, because it isn't just going to be accidental, right? It's going to have to be intentional, and it's going to take work on your part. And I'm a firm believer that when we do our part, God does His part. He comes alongside of us. So I hope that tonight this was encouraging to you. I hope that it blessed you, and you got something from me, from being try to be as extremely vulnerable as I can with you guys, sharing these things. So if you have any questions, uh, hit me up with a private message or drop it in the comments below, and I'll get back to you. I love you guys, and we'll see you tomorrow for My Life Monday. Have a good night.